Every year in Europe and Asia, more people end up in hospitals after a tick bite. For some, it means a few days of fever. For others, paralysis and disability for life. A simple question arises: why do the same infections suddenly appear where they were hardly heard of before? In this video, we will figure out how humans themselves helped ticks and dangerous viruses move through forests, farms, and cities across the entire Eurasian continent. A tick is not a random bug in the grass, but a specialized parasite with a multi-year life cycle. At every stage, it needs a new host. The larva clings to a small rodent, the nymph to a bird or small animal, the adult to a large beast or a human. Along with blood, the tick receives and transmits disease agents, which can quietly circulate in nature for decades. For doctors, a tick bite was a minor household problem for a long time, unpleasant but not fatal. People were more scared of plague, cholera, malaria, and other obvious epidemics. But as infectious medicine developed, a strange coincidence became noticeable. In forest regions of different European and Asian countries, nervous system diseases regularly appeared in those who had contact with nature. Gradually, researchers realized that this involves a whole group of natural focal infections. This is what they call diseases that exist for decades in the wild ecosystem between animals and parasites, almost not touching humans. Ticks turned out to have several such sets: the tick-borne encephalitis virus, various bacteria causing severe fevers and joint damage. At the same time, ticks themselves were strictly tied to their natural zones for centuries. Some species lived in the humid forests of the western part of the continent, others in the taiga, third ones in steppe and mountain regions. Their ranges were determined by climate, vegetation, and the set of wild hosts, rodents, birds, hoofed animals. In some regions, ancient stable infection foci formed. In others, people were almost not afraid of the same ticks. The situation began to change when humans connected distant regions with a dense network of roads and began mass transporting animals. For hunting grounds, for nature reserves, for agriculture, deer, roe deer, boars, sheep, and cows were taken from some countries and areas to others. No one checked them for parasites. It was considered that a tick could simply be removed by hand. In practice, along with such transportations, new complexes of parasites and disease agents traveled across the continent. An animal that grew up in a region with an active tick-borne encephalitis focus might not have noticeable symptoms, but its skin already served as a food base for infected ticks. Moving it thousands of miles away, people also transported invisible passengers. Then, simple logic worked. In the new region, comfortable conditions were created for resettled animals: protection, feeding, limited hunting. They quickly mastered the territory, contacted local species, came out to farms and fields. Ticks did not stay in place either. They crawled from new hosts to old ones, anchoring infections alien to this district in the ecosystem. After a few years, a full set of a natural focus appeared in such places. Local rodents and small predators became intermediate hosts. Young ticks went through all development stages already on this territory. For residents, everything looked like a sudden invasion, although the real reason was hidden in the decision to bring wild or domestic animals here from another edge of Eurasia sometime in the past. Migratory birds play a separate role, connecting south and north, west and east of the continent. In spring and fall, millions of birds fly through forest zones, agricultural districts, and coastal territories. Larvae and nymphs of ticks often sit on their bodies, too small to be noticed even by an attentive ornithologist. These parasites calmly survive the flight and descend to the ground in a new region. The bird lands to rest in a forest belt, in a suburban park, or on the edge of a field. The tick moves to the first available host. This can be a mouse, hedgehog, squirrel, cat, dog, or human. If a virus or bacteria from a distant focus is already inside the parasite, then from this moment, an infectious agent alien to it begins to work in the ecosystem. Thus, natural migrations turn into a transport line for diseases. The modern landscape of Europe and Asia differs strongly from what was there 100 years ago. Large, continuous forest and steppe tracts are broken by roads, power lines, settlements, and cities. Simultaneously, huge areas of former agricultural lands are abandoned and overgrown with bushes and young trees. For wild beasts and ticks, this is not chaos, but a convenient corridor for resettlement. Beasts walk along these corridors following food and shelter, move from one country to another, come out to agricultural districts and suburbs. Ticks cannot move fast themselves, but they use the fact that their hosts constantly migrate perfectly. There is no border control and customs for the parasite. It simply clings to any animal that follows along a new forest tract or road edge. Climate changes only intensify this process. In a number of regions, winters have become milder and shorter. Stable snow cover keeps heat at the soil surface longer. This means that more ticks survive until spring, and the activity period stretches for additional weeks. Summer has become warmer and more humid in those zones where it used to be too dry, and there it became easier for ticks to gain a foothold. Mountain regions are no less important, where until recently it was considered too cold and harsh for ticks and their agents. As it gets warmer, lower and middle altitudes became more comfortable. The amount of vegetation and wild animals increased. Tourists were drawn to new places, and infections came there with them, which were previously associated only with valleys and plains. City dwellers also made a contribution to the spread of ticks. Around big cities, kilometers of summer cottage communities, private houses, residential developments, and green belts arose. People settled right at the junction of forest and agricultural lands, got dogs, began feeding birds and wild beasts. For ticks, this is ideal. Nearby are wild hosts and domestic animals, and people who regularly go out into the grass. Domestic pets became an important bridge between wild nature and human housing. A dog or cat easily picks up a tick during a walk in the forest, in a field, or in a city park. Then the animal returns home, lies on the couch, on the carpet, or in the nursery, and the tick can detach and hide in a crack or in fabric. Thus, the parasite gets a chance to attack a person who went nowhere. At the level of statistics, all this looks like a slow but very stable expansion of dangerous zones. Risk maps for tick infections are updated every few years, and new foci appear on them, especially in suburban districts. What was previously considered a safe forest for walks suddenly falls into health department reports as a territory with increased morbidity. At the same time, it is important to understand that we are not talking about some single type of parasite. A whole group of ticks works on the Eurasian continent, having mastered different climatic zones. The forest tick is common in Western and Central Europe. The taiga tick dominates in northern and eastern forests. In some regions, their ranges overlap, and there the picture is especially complex. In species intersection zones, the same forest can be home for several tick populations at once. They are active differently during the season, differ slightly in behavior, prefer different hosts. This means that the risk for humans is distributed unevenly. In some months, people encounter one vector species more often, in others, another. Calculating simple activity graphs does not work here anymore. A separate difficulty is connected with the fact that the share of infected ticks also changes strongly. In some regions, every 10th parasite carries the tick-borne encephalitis virus. In others, out of 100 collected specimens, only a few will turn out to be dangerous. This is influenced by a combination of factors: rodent density, forest structure, humidity level, animal relocation history, and climate fluctuations over the previous decade. When epidemiologists see a growth in the number of cases in some district, they have to look much wider than just at the number of ticks. They analyze how land use changed, where new roads and settlements appeared, which wild animal species became more numerous, how migratory bird routes shifted. Almost always a chain of specific human decisions stands behind the spike. For example, in one region, they might have actively developed hunting tourism. For this, they brought several hundred deer from another country, where tick-borne encephalitis foci have long been known. The animals were released into the grounds, they multiplied, came out to fields and forest paths used by locals. After a few years, a new focus arose in this district, although such cases were not recorded before. In another place, authorities bet on developing ecotourism. They laid hiking routes through little developed forests, advertised hikes, built small tourist bases. The forest tract, where previously mostly foresters and hunters visited, became accessible to thousands of city dwellers. At the same time, no one thought about the fact that statistics on tick bites would grow sharply along with people. Sometimes even refusal to intervene leads to the appearance of new foci rather than active development. Where agricultural fields were located for decades, people left, and the territory began to overgrow. First grasses appear, then bushes and young trees, rodents and wild beasts pull up. Ticks are comfortable there, but for locals it still seems like an open field and not a dangerous natural zone. Against the background of all this conspiracy, theories also appear. Someone claims that dangerous ticks were allegedly deliberately brought from laboratories. Someone blames military programs of the last century for everything. Such stories spread easily because they give a simple explanation to a complex reality. But real analysis shows that most often not secret experiments are to blame, but a long row of ordinary economic decisions. An important point: ticks and infections connected with them are not only a problem of taiga and village districts. More and more cases are registered in suburban zones, in small towns, in parks of large megacities. People continue to perceive the urban landscape as safe, although green areas along rivers, old gardens, and abandoned zones create ideal conditions for rodents and parasites to live. At the same time, a complete refusal of greenery is impossible, and pointless too. City dwellers need parks, forest parks, embankments. People are not ready to live in a fully paved environment. This means we have to learn to live with the risk that ticks and other parasites bring. And the more we understand about their resettlement, the easier it is to choose reasonable protection measures instead of panic or indifference. One of the main conclusions from this story is that tick infections do not respect administrative borders. A virus that circulated in one mountain range for decades can end up in another country in a few years with the help of birds or transported animals. Countries can keep statistics differently, but for the parasite itself, there is no difference which flag this or that forest belongs to. This means that the fight against tick diseases cannot be a purely local task. Even if one country actively conducts vaccination of residents in dangerous regions and informs the population, a neighboring one can relate to the problem much more calmly. People will travel on vacation, animals will continue to migrate, and ticks and their agents will cross new frontiers. In such a situation, international risk maps and data exchange have special meaning. Scientists and health departments of different countries collect information about disease cases, about tick infection rates, about animal population dynamics. This allows seeing not only small foci, but also large trends. For example, the shift of high-risk zones to the north or to high altitudes as the climate warms. But even the most accurate maps do not replace basic rules of behavior in natural zones. The majority of people get a tick bite not during complex expeditions, but during ordinary walks, picnics, yard work, or trips to the vacation home. The habit of checking clothes and body after going out into the grass, using repellents and closed clothes, already strongly lowers the probability of becoming part of the sad statistics. Educating children and teenagers is especially important, who often run on grass, play in bushes, and do not think about parasites. If you explain from childhood that a tick is not a mythical, scary beast, but a quite real danger for which one can prepare, the behavior of the whole generation changes. Then protection ceases to be an imposed measure and becomes an elementary habit on par with a seatbelt in a car. Countries that realized the scale of the problem in time bet not only on medicine, but also on information. In high-risk zones, understandable diagrams are placed, showing how to dress correctly, how to remove a tick when one needs to contact a doctor. Schools and tourist centers conduct short lectures and do not limit themselves to formal pamphlets. This does not cancel the threat, but lowers the share of severe outcomes. Where the problem was ignored for a long time, the system works significantly worse. People are not vaccinated, doctors on site do not always recognize symptoms in time, health departments do not manage to update risk maps. In such cases, even mild climate warming and a few unfavorable seasons can cause a spike in diseases, which looks like an unexpected catastrophe. Against the background of global themes like pandemics and new viruses, it is easy to underestimate the topic of ticks. It seems that this is a minor summer problem connected with the forest and the cabin. But the reality is that tick infections stably cause damage to health and the economy of many countries, force spending resources on treatment, vaccination, public health measures. This is a quiet but very persistent threat. It is also important that ticks do not stand still from the point of view of biology. Under the pressure of climate changes and human intervention, their populations also change. Somewhere the share of those individuals grows that are active at lower temperatures, somewhere lines strengthen that tolerate drought better. This means that usual time frames of danger are gradually blurring. Along with the climate, the composition of tick hosts changes. In some regions, the number of deer and roe deer increases. In others, the population of wild boars grows. In third ones, new species of birds and rodents settle next to people. Every such change slightly adjusts the scheme of infection circulation, and in some, this gives a noticeable shift in one human generation. If we reduce the picture to one level, we get a simple but unpleasant formula. Humans changed the landscape, connected distant regions with transport, resettled animals, and warmed the climate. Ticks and agents carried by them took advantage of this to expand their range. As a result, on the map of Europe and Asia, many more zones appeared where a tick bite is no longer a harmless incident, but a serious risk. At the same time, one cannot say that humans are completely defenseless. Modern vaccines against some tick infections proved their effectiveness, especially for residents and tourists in high-risk zones. Regular shots, timely visits to a doctor after a bite, competent diagnostics and treatment already saved thousands of people from severe consequences. The question is only whether everyone who is in the risk group uses this tool. This story clearly shows how a tiny parasite is capable of exposing weak spots in the healthcare system and territory management. Where forestry and agricultural policy live separately from medical statistics, ticks receive maximum freedom. Where specialists of different fields work together, it is easier to forecast and prevent new outbreaks. For the simple viewer, the most important conclusion here is that the threat should not be underestimated, but demonizing it is also pointless. A tick does not hunt specifically for you. It simply uses any opportunity to get to the blood of the next host. The more competently a person behaves in natural zones, the more attentive they treat signals of their own body after a bite, the fewer chances the infection has. At the continent level, the story of ticks is a kind of chronicle of how we treated nature. Every new disease focus reminds of a cut-down forest tract, of relocated deer, of abandoned fields, of uncontrolled growth of suburbs. This is a map of mistakes and miscalculations, but simultaneously a hint where the course can still be corrected until consequences become irreversible. Every bite, every recorded disease is a reminder that borders between wild nature and the human world are conditional. Any path from the city to the forest is not just a walking route, but a line of contact with a whole system of living organisms, including parasites. The better we understand this system, the calmer and safer we can move through it. Write in the comments if you have had to deal with tick bites, if you know cases of severe consequences among acquaintances, and if your attitude to walks in the forest changed after such stories. Personal experience of people from different countries helps to better understand the real picture than dry figures of statistics. Be sure to subscribe and hit the like button. This will help promote a topic that is often remembered only in summer, although in fact it concerns a whole continent.